So I suggest we start. Dear ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, respected colleagues and friends, allow me to warmly welcome you on behalf of the organizers of the InvestTalk panel, that is on behalf of the bank assets management company named DUTB, and on behalf of the National Investment Promotion Agency of Slovenia named SPIRIT Slovenia. This is a different sort of a panel. Maybe at the beginning it may seem it's a more promotional one, but we all strongly believe you'll find lots of useful information. I hope also lots of useful business and investment opportunities, and we also hope that at the next Bled Strateški Forum 2018 edition, we hope we'll have some new investors in Slovenia sitting among us. But in order to have a very fruitful discussion and presentation, we have some key speakers from DUTB. So if you allow me, I'd like to introduce them to you. So Mr. Imre Balogh, the CEO of DUTB. We have two executive directors, Mr. Janez Škrubej, the executive director for asset management, Mr. Aleš Koršič, the executive director for corporate affairs, and we also have two portfolio directors with us, Mr. Igor Gruden, the director of credit management and workout, and Mr. Andrej Lazar, the director of real estate management. Allow me to introduce myself as well. My name is Matej, Skočir. I'm the head of FDI division within SPIRIT Slovenia. And before we start with the panel presentation, I'd just like to share with you some basic introduction on what's happening with the FDI inflows on a global level. So this is the outlook from the historical perspective on the FDI inflows. So if you take a look, you'll see that we can notice a downturn in 2010, which continued to 2012. And of course, it is also connected with the financial crisis. You have to be aware that the peak of the FDI inflows was reached in 2007. Only in 2013 and 2014 we can notice a slow recovery in FDI inflows. So the figure in 2016 reached $1.75 trillion. What are the expectations for the future? Well, the expectations still show slow recovery. So also in 2017 and 2018. So the expectation is that the FDI inflows on a global level should reach $1.85 trillion on a global level. Well, you have to be aware that this is still below the 2007 peak. But in this last decade, some new trends have happened, and those new trends are associated with the changes between the investments coming from the developed and the developing economies. We see some changes in mergers and acquisitions, and also we have a new actor on the stage, the state-owned enterprises. That's the graph that shows the trends. So you can see the peak in 2007, but it also shows the changing pattern. So there are two reasons for that. The first thing what we can notice that we can notice some new players, some new actors that are not necessarily coming from the developed economies, but they are also coming from the developing economies. And the second thing is we can notice also some large mega mergers and acquisitions that have pushed the investments in the developed economies and not only in the developing economies. So if we can take a look on who's on that list, this is the list of the FDI by countries of origin. So on the top of the list we can find the United States and also some other developed economies like Netherlands, Japan, Canada, France, Ireland. But if you take a look at the second and the fifth ranking, you will find China and Hong Kong. And if you combine and calculate the statistics of China and Hong Kong, you can see that China is slowly catching up the United States, which are on the first spot, and do not neglect, we also have Taiwan at the end of the list. The second thing that's visible is the large mergers and acquisitions that have happened. This is the FDI inflows by component in the developed economies. So if you can see, let's say, what quarter of the investments of this FDI inflows are the reinvestments, 25%. 75% of that are the equity inflows. Why do they have so large portion? It's because of the big cross-border mergers and acquisitions that have happened in developed economies. Just to give you an example, the Sub Miller brewery deal in UK was worth $101 billion. And that's really contributing, you know, to the figures in the developed economies. And the third thing that we can see, let's say, in this FDI field are the new actors, the so-called state-owned enterprises. They're really becoming an important source of FDI, and they really play a major role in the world economy. They seem rather small, only 1.5% of all the multinationals, but so far they already own 10% of all the foreign affiliates. Who's on that list? Surprisingly, 2/5 of those companies are coming from developed economies, from the European Union, and the rest, they're coming from the developing economies, with China on the top of the list. This is the list of the country of origin. So no state-owned companies from US, Canada, Japan, but from the European Union, and then the rest from the developing economies. So we have China, India, Malaysia, South Africa, Russian Federation. Where are they investing? Not necessarily to their domestic market. If you take a look where they're creating their own affiliates, you'll find that they are mainly investing to the markets of the European Union and the markets of the United States. Does that affect Slovenia somehow? Do we see that in Slovenia? Well, from the first glance, it may seem that the companies with foreign and mixed capital in Slovenia are rather small. They only represent 5%, but they are really of substantial importance to the economic success because, just to give an example, they create 40% of all the export. Where do we have the investors from? We have them mainly from the Western Europe. So far, we don't see it on the list, let's say, the countries from the developing markets. What's happening with the FDI stock in Slovenia? In 2015, it was 11.6 billion euros. In 2016, it was 12.9 billion euros. That's an increase of 1.3 billion euros. That's a record result. Is that going to change? Will we see something else in the future? What's there to be offered from Slovenia? Well, for that reason, I would like to yield the floor to representative of DUTB, to Mr. Balogh. So from DUTB, who is one of the key players, whenever we discuss investments, either in terms of loans, either in terms of companies, shares, assets, or either in terms of the real estate opportunities. So Mr. Balogh, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Very welcome to our presentation. We are going to talk about the general context of DUTB, who we are, what we are doing. And also in what structures we are operating, and after that we are going to present to you the most important part of our speech, the business opportunities, some good examples from the past, and even more which are on the plate today. So provide you some appetizers after lunch. And would like to convince you either if you are coming from an investment background, or you have an influence on or can spread the message that it is worth doing business in Slovenia, and especially with DUTB we have quite a number of assets for sale. Just a brief reminder of why and how DUTB was created, and I think it's very important because memories are short, and looking back in retrospect, sometimes now it seems that the talk is about all the problems started in 2013, especially with the establishment of DUTB, so as if we were creating the problems and not solving the problems. Our aim today is partially to show that we are part of the solution to the problems. So Slovenia actually was a kind of darling of the market after the EU accession. Very fast growth in GDP, low unemployment rate, joined the Eurozone among one of the first countries of the new among the new members. But also the seeds of the future crisis were planted, excessive credit growth, especially in the corporate indebtedness. And then came the cold shower, the global financial crisis, which Slovenia reacted quite late. And many of the problems are stemming from that late reaction, both to the global challenges and to the homegrown problems. So there was a sharp drop in GDP, employment, budget deficit increased, public debt also, and the corporate NPS skyrocketed. If we look at the graphs, it is clearly something of a roller coaster, which we can see in the GDP growth after being one of the champions before 2008. Slovenia came as the silver medalist among Eurozone countries in terms of negative growth, only after Greece. And after 2013, when significant measures were taken, then Slovenia regained its momentum, and now the country is one of the best performers in terms of growth in Europe and in the Eurozone. The same applies to the budget deficit. It significantly widened after the crisis, peaking in 2013 because of the significant public spending on the bank rehabilitation. And since then, it is very close again to the very prudent levels before the crisis. Unemployment also was falling during the golden days, hiking in the crisis, and now they are almost back to pre-crisis levels. The same applies to public debt to GDP. Very prudent budget management before the crisis, a lot of spending on saving enterprises and banks during the crisis period, and now there is a decline again, which is from the aspect of DUTB, the corporate NPL. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, it is missing from the statistics before 2010, but actually it was quite low in only 3% in 2007, and from that it reached the peak. Again, one of the champions in Europe, 28% NPL in the banking sector of the corporate portfolios. And then after the transfers to DUTB plus the workout activities of the banks, it is back to almost normal level again. And in line with that, the banking sector suffered significant losses after the crisis, peaking in 2013. But since then, after the cleaning of the portfolios, the banking sector is back to profitability again. Now let's have a look what could be DUTB's contribution. And for that, it is very important to show that what was our size in the economy at the beginning. It is a little bit difficult task because the assets were transferred in tranches. So to make a comparison for a snapshot, it is relatively difficult, but we can say that roughly 25% of gross loans to domestic corporations and sole proprietors were transferred to DUTB. So 1/4 of all loans, not just the NPLs, but all loans. 60% of the NPLs, which constituted like 16% of the Slovenian GDP back in 2013. And what is the most difficult to estimate, because there are no statistics, but it is a very conservative, probably too low figure, but at least 10-12% of the Slovenian GDP and employment was in the companies where DUTB took over the distressed assets. So a lot was at stake, not just in terms of value of the assets we have taken over, but in terms of if we have done the job badly, then this would have had a serious negative effect on the Slovenian economy. Luckily, I will show you, this was not the case. But before we go to that, just a reminder of what happened in 2013. DUTB was established. 6 banks in the system were recapitalized by 3.4 billion, which was in addition to some 700 million recapitalization into Nullarbor and NKBM in 2011 and 12. The transfer of 5 billion corporate exposures were from systemic banks in 2013 and 14, and after that another roughly 800 million was coming from the merger of Faktorbanka and Probanka, 2 banks which were in orderly liquidation. DUTB's mission is to cash the assets as fast as possible, be a key restructuring player in the Slovenian economy, to repay the raised debt, and that way reduce the guarantees for the Republic of Slovenia provided for the debts, not just for DUTB, but also the taken over banks, the Faktorbanka and Probanka, and also be a catalyst in the corporate governance and performance improvements in the corporations. And we have 2 key financial targets: 8% cumulative return on capital and minimum 10% cash generation every year from the asset base. The figures, these are the tranches which were transferred to DUTB, but I would like to call your attention to the right-hand side of the, where we can see 5.8 billion altogether, the gross value of assets transferred to DUTB. It was 2 billion according to the so-called real economic value or transfer prices, which were far from the market prices as estimated by the European Commission. It was like 600 million embedded implicit stated in that. So it means that in market terms, DUTB assets were 1.4 billion. According to our own valuation, it was 1.8 billion, so roughly 200 million reduction from the assets transfer values. Our biggest success, cash generation. In the 3.5 years since the real start of the operations of DUTB, we have already generated more than 1.1 billion cash, which is more than 50% of our assets. So we are more than halfway through in the realization of our mandate and mission. And what you can see, very important, that the basic bread and butter business, the small tickets, are constantly growing and providing a very stable cash flow, which, as you can see, this year we are already above the annual target, so for the whole year in sales. So we are less than the year-end portfolio. And coming back to the cash generation, that made possible a major shift in our funding structure, which was originally fixed maturity, high cost debt. We have gradually replaced that with low cost, flexible debt, and at the same time, we already repaid half of the original debt. This has a significant impact on the result of DUTB because the fixed excessive cost of financing was very much burdening the results in the first couple of years. As you can see, financing costs for DUTB were much, much higher. There were years when it was more than 4 times bigger than the operating costs. And now, through this replacement of the debt and a much more tight liquidity management, we could reduce now the financing costs this year roughly to the same level as our operating costs. These have shown very much in the results. In previous years, as you can see, DUTB had negative profit, but mostly because of the financing costs. However, these financing costs are guarantee fees to the government and, let's call it, excessive interest payment to public sector banks. So if we altogether watch what is already the contribution of DUTB financially to the economy, from the original capital, practically almost everything was used up due to the valuation differences, that assets were overvalued, which were transferred to DUTB, not undervalued as many say. In the meantime, we have already added 36 million in terms of profit, in the profit stream. But what is even more important, 84 million we recycled to the public sector via guarantee fees and interest payments to public sector banks. So altogether, we can say that in 3.5 years, DUTB generated a cash or a financial return in excess of 110 million to the Slovenian public sector. And now I pass the word to my colleague Aleš, who will talk about our principles.
Thanks, Imre. Yeah, thanks. Well, I promise you I'll be much quicker given the time constraints, and I even took my cheating notes with me. So I believe that the results presented would not be achieved if without our great, without the great work of our staff. But I also believe that a very well-regulated framework gives us the grounds for our good performance, as DUTB is a special type of company, is also regulated by a special type of law. The law is measures of the Republic of Slovenia to strengthen the stability of banks Act. Between the bracket is the Slovenian abbreviation. We call it ZUGSP. So the bylaws regulating DUTB operations is the decree on the implementation. There is also worth to mention the guidelines, which were adopted based on the ZUGSP in the year 2015. And of course, least but not last, a very important document is the Articles of Association of the company. As you see, the company is a state-owned company. The government exercise its rights through the General Assembly. The Ministry of Finance play also a very important role in our activities. Given that they monitor the work of DUTB, we have to report to the Ministry of Finance on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis, and then further on they do report to the government and to the parliament. Nevertheless, they cannot be actively involved in our individual business decisions. Other stakeholders, which are also very much involved in our operations, in order to assure the transparent and ethical operations, are the Court of Audit, Commission for Prevention of Corruption, Information Commissioner, Office for Money Laundering Prevention. As already mentioned, DUTB operations are independent, and so it is the Board of Directors, which is composed of 7 members, out of which 3 are executive directors responsible for effective asset management, and 4 are non-executive directors directly actually appointed by the government, and their main role is to appoint the executive directors and to supervise the company's operations. Well, as said, the results would probably not be achieved if we wouldn't have great staff, out of which 90 experts from the so-called first line do directly manage the distressed assets. And in our, we call it factory, the transparency, strict ethical and anti-corruption behavior, rules and business practices and highly professional executions are set as standard on all levels of the company, and all employees are committed to that. So ethical modus operandi through entire organization is our must. We try to ensure it by building, or we built actually several defense lines which are directly responsible and directly reporting to the board of directors. So the internal audit, the compliance and anti-money laundering department, and the corporate security. No, I lost my figures, sorry. Well, in addition to the established function, we adopted also the personal integrity plan for employees, which we did align with the Commission for Prevention of Corruption. As confirmation of our not only good practice, but a rule to follow high ethical and quality standards, we successfully obtained an anti-corruption compliance certificate in 2015, and we are currently in a phase of renewing and upgrading the document. The goal is to obtain the ISO standard, which we are currently in the process of obtaining. So the roles in our organization are strictly segregated, but what distinguishes the company is the teamwork. Highly motivated employees and transparent sales process are the basis for a successful outcome. In order to ensure the transparency, we adopted several measures like Know Your Customer principle and several other measures, and we are obliged to follow the law on prevention of money laundering and financing of terrorism. I'm sure that we created a very efficient company. Our decisions are very quick. You can see it also from the time flow. The whole process from the start to the beginning usually does not take longer than 2 to 3 months. All investors in tenders are treated equally. So after 3.5 years of active operation, DUTB is recognized as a highly competent platform for MPL managing and corporate restructuring with performance and development oriented management. Our best practices are shared internally and externally. And let me just finish my part. Although it may sound surprising, but we are actually very proud that our staff is in high demand on the labor market. And I will pass the word to Janez.
Hi everyone, from my side. As said at the beginning, I'm responsible for asset management, and since I hope that there are some potential investors among you, or at least you know one or two, Basically, I would approach it from the perspective of what investors actually want, and this is basically the track record of operations and then the pipeline of potential projects. And as part of our track record, there will be some success stories mentioned, basically also to show you some of the complexities we are dealing with, but mainly from the perspective that it is, let's say, in the interest of the investor to actually come to Slovenia, because we do have a successful track record to show. And to point that out is basically that in the past 3 years of operations, we successfully already sold 57 loans. You see that out of these 57 transactions, there was a large number also of foreign investors, so that shows that we are able to attract investors from abroad and provide the equal treatment to everyone. And you also see that we managed to actually get the competitive process going, so the average number of interested parties or investors per case is also clearly shown here, and the total value generated in this respect, 300 million. The same goes then for our ownership in the companies. We deal with minority ownerships as well as the majority. Later on in my presentation, I will basically show you some of our still remaining majority-owned opportunities which will come to the market in the next 2 years. But as you see, we managed already to sell 33 of those. Also, the track record here shows the competitiveness and the international flavor of those processes. What is also mentioned on that slide, and we are also proud of that, is that we, during our active management of loan exposures, were able to get full repayment out of 6 debtors, which were transferred to us, and that generated more than 100 million of inflows to DUTB. So the success stories basically don't come, how should I say, easy, but we have to deal with very complex situations. We are dealing with still many other creditors. Usually there are 7, 8 banks sitting together with us at the same table, or were sitting in the past couple of years before the cases were resolved. Then there are other stakeholders like former management, former owners, different interested parties. So when taking all this into consideration, at the end of the day, we also need to act responsibly. I mean, we do have the private investor rule to follow, so all our decisions are made on that basis only, and the price is our only criteria, so value maximization in this respect. But at the end of the day, we cannot escape the fact that there are a large number of employees working in those companies we are responsible for, and many different cities and communities actually depend on our decisions. Some of the success stories and a little bit background to those, but really from the perspective that would make the investors welcome in our house, is that the first one is Pivovarna Laško. This is our largest brewery in Slovenia. I hope you already had some beer while during your stay here, but we had an interesting situation here because we got an ownership stake in the company as part of the transfer, but not the debt. So the banks were still controlling the debt, and we were the minority owners, however the largest. The banks demanded the capital increase, and actually we had to deal with the situation where there were potentially 2 competitive processes, one for the capital increase and one for the sale of the company. We were able to manage that in a way to join all the interest and make it a very competitive process, resulting in a transaction value of over 400 million euros. And basically the transaction multiple of around 12 times EBITDA, which is also for this industry quite an achievement. And at the end of the day, Heineken was the one who offered the most. Then AHA-EMI is also maybe not a very large company, but it is a company quite important in its segment of aluminum product producers, and in this case we did the financial restructuring, became the only owner of the company, and basically soon realized that we need to find an investor from that industry, and we found it actually in the Polish listed company of Grupa Kiety, who was able to join the process, which was then also carried out in a competitive manner quite soon. I think the actual transaction happened in 4 months' time. The next one is AHA Plastic, also maybe not large in terms of revenue, but large in terms of employees and the community in the western part of Slovenia, and quite important supplier of plastic packaging to the Slovenian industrial producers. And one of those, namely UP, joined the process and then successfully bought the company and took it under its ownership. Sistemska Tehnika, again, an important company to the northern part of Slovenia, employing over 200 people. Very competitive process a year and a half ago, where then the Russian-owned Slovenian Steel Group was able to claim it at the end. CIMOS is our recent case, which we can add to the success stories, where we not only did a very substantial financial restructuring, but we also had to do quite extensive operational restructuring. This is one of the largest companies in the, let's say, area of former Yugoslavia, and is also operating in Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia, Serbia. So it was like a multinational transaction in this respect. At the end, we put in a very well experienced and seasoned German executives, coupled with Slovenian counterparts here, and after that operational restructuring, which also got the recognition from the likes of Ford and BMW and Audi, who are basically the main customers of CIMOS, was then successfully sold to the Italian strategic investor a few months ago. So we were not only selling equities, but basically also loans, as shown at the beginning. There's one large transaction that we would like to point out, because that shows that we are able to put together a sizable package of interest to larger international investors. So back in 2015, we decided to put together a case of 4 loans, 3 of them towards the companies who have already in the past received state aid. And in this respect, then also our maneuvering with regard to financial restructuring was a little bit limited, and then couple it together with one large loan exposure, which we were able to bring from the brink of bankruptcy towards the steady, predictable cash flow outcome, put it all together, put it on the market, and basically we managed that transaction in 4 months' time, and also a little bit shocked Slovenia in this respect. But nonetheless, that put Slovenia on the market of financial investors, seeing that there is a pipeline of opportunities here to follow. One example from the real estate segment is a residential complex here in Ljubljana, where we actually had more than 200 flats and 30 business premises pledged to us. And this was practically one of our first decisions. It is somehow called the Christmas New Year decision of 2014, where we decided to stop the sale through the bankruptcy proceedings and basically got to the headlines because of that. Basically, and decided that we would take it over, we would refresh the apartments, put them in their orderly manner sale process, which we started last September, and by today we practically sold everything off at almost double the pricing at which we stopped the sale in the beginning of 2014. So this is a little bit about the track record, really trying to show you that we are operational in this respect. With regard to the current portfolio structure, we still have almost 800 million of loans towards different companies. Here shown different also industrial segments which we need to deal with. So as opposed to some other bad banks in Europe, we are dealing really with many different industries. Not only real estate. So this is the structure with regard to recovery and restructuring portfolio we still own. Recovery means that this is bankruptcy procedures, and this is practically a lot of them already inherited. The restructuring part relates to the companies where we believe that we should keep them in operation, as this is best for the outcome of the case. And now to the investment opportunities. I would mention 7 larger companies, and then I think similar number of real estate opportunities, which I hope you can then share also with some of your colleagues back home. We are the majority owner of all those companies, so or the majority stake is pledged to us, meaning that we control the actual sale of the company. In this respect, as said, practically all those will be put to market in the next 2 years. We usually make announcements not only on our webpage, but also in the international media, and of course local ones, and we actively also try to reach out to the obvious investors from financial and strategic field. So Mariborska Livarna is basically a company with a long tradition of supply of aluminium products, very complex one, to the auto industry. We are in all those cases very close to the operations of those companies, and we can say that also in this case, like in the CIMOS case, the operational part of the restructuring was well performed and done, and the customers are basically happy with the quality and deliveries of the products. So so this is one which we would like to mention first. The revenue here is basically just to show you a little bit of the indication of the size of the business. Alpina is a company well known to not only to Slovenians, but we believe also in many other continents of the world, mainly due to the cross-country ski equipment that they make. So the next time you watch the cross-country event, if you see red shoes on the athlete, then it's pretty much sure that it's coming from Slovenia. And I think around 30 to 40% market global share is owned by Alpina. So not only for those shoes, but also for the alpine and hiking shoes, we believe that this company will gather quite a bit of interest when the actual sale starts. Definitely not this year because we still have some operational part to do, but in the years to follow. Farme Ihan, you would not believe, but we also 100% own the pig farm and meat processing plant in this respect. having the only brand on Slovenian market which can claim the full Slovenian origin, which is nowadays very important, and customers and consumers are more and more aware of the facts. So the indication with regard to the size is also mentioned here. Mladinska knjiga is our largest publishing house. We are 51% owner of that one, and it is not only present on Slovenian but also on the markets of former Yugoslavia, and will basically create a good, let's say, platform for an investor to enter not only Slovenia but also other markets mentioned before. Big Bank, it's actually a large audio-video equipment and computer product retailer in Slovenia with very strong internet shop and also physical shops throughout Slovenia. We have a majority pledge we have the pledge over the majority stake in that company, which will be put now on the market soon. Termana Laško, although the picture looks like only like a hotel and spa resort, but we would really like to point out its medical treatment capabilities, because it's really known for its medical staff, very competent in a way of rehabilitation of people after surgery or brain strokes, and unfortunately, you know, that due to stress that we all face in our work, that segment of the market, it's unfortunately growing also in Slovenia. So that one will also be available probably sometimes after New Year. Raune Press is a company in the north of Slovenia, and I believe the CEO is also attending this event, Mrs. Gnamush, and this is maybe not a very large company in terms of revenues. This is now the current ones. In the history, they have been doing also around 50% more than that. But the strong point of that company is really that its mechanical and hydraulic presses are actually known to the customers from Russia to Detroit. So there is a reference list long, and actually customers calling themselves to actually buy more. So we believe this is a good opportunity which will actually start in the next, I believe, months or so. So this is basically the ownership stakes where we fully control the whole process of the disposal. And now to the real estate part. We pointed out on the Slovenian map actually 6 real estate opportunities in different parts of Slovenia. You will see in the presentation, but you also have the presentation, I believe, on the sticks in the bags that are provided on your seats, so you can check more details. But the fact is that Sežana and Želodnik are 2 very large opportunities, because the size of the land there is over 300,000 square meters, and basically provides a very good opportunity for land developers due to its their strategic position, one to main city of Ljubljana and close to the strategic routes northeast and southwest. And then there are also 3 other industrial sites, Brežice towards Croatian border, Sežana, Koper, actually near to the port of Koper, and Krumberg, close to Italy, which are all around 20 to 30,000 square meters in size, and actually provide for opportunity for individual greenfield investments. The last real estate opportunity I want to mention are the hotels on Pohorje. We actually own the hotels, but are operated by the hotel operator currently, and they are actually put to the market at the time. The good thing about this is not only the fact that during winter time the famous Gold Fox competition takes place at the area, so providing for very good marketing opportunity, but also that you practically control the whole destination. So you control the bottom of the hill, the top of the hill, and you have the opportunity to develop winter and summer tourism here. The last thing is that we have decided also not to only sell the land, but also go into the partnerships with private investors. And for that part, we have quite a number of real interesting lands, mainly in the capital city of Ljubljana. So we will very soon have probably one of the first tenders to call for the co-investment here, whereby we would create an SPV, invite through the competitive process interested private parties who would then contribute cash and knowledge, and we would provide the supervision, and then at the end of the day get the premium to the actual sale of land itself. So back to Imre.
Thank you, Janez. Just to wrap up about what was DUTB's impact. As we have shown in the beginning, DUTB was really the transferred assets were constituting a very significant part of the corporate sector in Slovenia. And through the active management, what we have done is we are convinced that we contributed significantly to the revival of the Slovenian economy by unlocking previously frozen or inefficiently used assets and recycling them back to the normal economy, mostly selling to private investors. We have reduced the outstanding debt more than 50%. I hope Mr. Burkhardt is also happy that we have relieved the Slovenian banks, the key Slovenian banks, at least partially from their burden of NPLs. We reduced the originally 2.6 billion government guarantee provided to DUTB and the two banks which we merged. Now it is below 900 million from the original 2.6. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we have already produced cash return more than 100 million to the Republic. And this means that we can say that DUTB is a really credible business partner for the future. This is because we have very strong internal controls over every aspect. DUTB is very transparent, ethical institution. It is not any type of reputational risk to do business with us. Second, although we are 100% state-owned, we are all coming from the private sector, so we speak the language of business rather than the language of bureaucracy. And our track record and our very transparent and efficient processes are really the guarantee that we finish the businesses what we started in the past, and we are going to finish the businesses which we start also in the future. And finally, as a kind of external endorsement, DUTB is more and more acknowledged by various opinion leaders in the international arena, including organizations like the European Commission, ECB, Asian Development Bank, European Banking Authority, and the likes, and also a number of national bad banks, or countries where they want to set up national bad banks are coming to us to share our experiences. And we are happy to do so. And I think we can show a good example how distressed asset management can be done in a very efficient and profitable manner. Thank you for your attention.
The presentations are completed, and I still think we have a few minutes left for the questions from the audience.
Could you tell us kindly, my name is Ravi Chaudhary from India. We have some people interested in India. Could you give a country-wise split up of the 18 companies sold to foreigners, which country they come from? And secondly, is data available on how these companies' performance has altered after they took over? That's a very prime index of the valuation process.
No, I can't give you an exact figure for the distribution, but I would say it's quite wide geographically. We have investors from UK and the US, mainly financial investors, from Finland, Poland, Czech Republic, Croatia, Italy, and these are the direct investments. And although there were only 18 among them, but some of the local investors are practically subsidiaries of foreign investors, like what was in the example that a Russian-owned company bought one of our exposures. With regard to the improvement of the performance after the sale, we don't have exact records of that. But what we know is that all of these companies are operating successfully. They are gaining new orders. Their business is up, and this is a very, very important aspect, because DUTB can take companies in the restructuring path only to a certain point, because we don't have that deep industrial experience, because we are state-owned. Therefore, we are very limited in terms of financing, providing equity or loans because of state aid rules and budget restrictions. So it is crucial that when the company is mature for that, we can transfer them. But just giving an example to you, from the companies where we have majority ownership, half of them already improved their operations in the last 2 or 3 years, that much that, for example, the average net debt to EBITDA ratio declined from 10 to roughly 4.5. So they are bankable again. That's why now we are not just selling companies, but we are actively marketing some of the restructured companies among the banks. That, look, guys, do your business, take them over, because now they are back to health.
Thank you very much for your interesting presentation. My name is Matej from Slovenia. I'm interested whether, and because this was not explicitly mentioned, there are also any credit opportunities, and also were you considering to sell the credit exposure via some sort of asset-backed security schemes, or at least providing some tranches for asset-backed securities as a package?
I wouldn't rule out that, although so far our experience have been that mainly individual investors were interested in specific assets. That's why package sales have not yet been the major method of sales. Now we are accelerating also new ways of generating cash. For 2017, the initiatives which we have already taken, or we are going to take one, what we mentioned is the refinancing. Second, the joint ventures, and also we are repossessing some real estate where there is only a marginal development cost, fit for sale kind of improvements, and then we can put them back to the market at much higher value. A very good example was Celovsky Dvory, but we have a number of other in the making. And it is also definitely a target to compile packages. In fact, I mean, we don't have to create asset-backed securities because most of the loans which were transferred to DUTB are more or less covered, collateralized, usually by real estate, some part is by equity. And that's why there is very strong interest in the loans, because through the loans, investors can get directly to those real estates. So packages will come. Asset-backed, in the traditional sense of asset-backed securities, not very likely.
Any other questions? Then I'll just to wrap up, you did list some of the investment opportunities. You have a very well-structured website where they can find it. If some of them would like to approach you, what would you suggest? What would be the best approach?
Yeah, thank you for this question. It's important. On our website, we have all our portfolio structurally presented, also with certain teasers for the companies mentioned here in the presentation. Also, with regard to the real estate, we have our whole portfolio analyzed and digitalized in this respect, that if you reach out to us saying we would like a land of that size with I don't know, production hall of that dimension, with this distance to the highway or to the railway, basically it is one click away to actually tell you whether we have it or where to find it if it's not directly owned by us. So the best approach is actually to contact one of us or through the contact and automated system through our website.
What is a new initiative for this year, and that's why it is very important if you list your or anyone to whom you recommend DUTB assets, the requirements, because we have built an investor database, and we will directly reach out to potential investors whenever we put an asset to the market, not just advertising on the stages. And of course, if you have any ideas right now, we are here. After the presentation, also our colleagues, as was mentioned, Igor Gruden, head of credit, and Andrei Lazar, head of real estate. So we are ready to talk about business anytime. And let me say that we have a lot on display, but the stock is running out fast, so be quick. Thank you.
Well, to conclude, I'd like to thank to the panel participants, to the audience. If you have some further questions, please rely on our experts, and wish you a pleasant continuation of the Bled Strateški Forum. Thank you once again.